Oh, honey, sit right down here on this creaky old porch swing with me, the kind that's been swaying under the weight of 100 summers just like the one we're having now. It's you and me, kiddo, no fancy crowds or interruptions, because what I'm about to spill from my heart ain't for just anybody. You see, back in the spring of 1952, when the lilacs were blooming wild along the fence row, I lost my baby boy, my Tommy. He was only 5 years old with those wild, curly locks bouncing as he chased fireflies across our little Iowa farmyard, his laugh echoing like church bells on a Sunday morning. One day he was tugging at my apron strings, begging for another slice of my rhubarb pie, and by nightfall that sneaky fever had crept in quiet as a cat stealing cream. It started with a cough, just a little tickle in his throat, I thought, but by dawn his cheeks were burning up hotter than a blacksmith's forge, and his eyes, those big blue ones that lit up my world, they were glassy and far away, like he was already slipping off to some place I couldn't follow. I rocked him in my arms all through that endless night, whispering old hymns my ma taught me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound, but nothing seemed to cut through the haze. Henry, my husband, he was kneeling by the bed, his big calloused hands clenched in prayer tears streaming down his weathered face, something you rarely saw from a man built like an oak tree who'd stare down dust storms and bank foreclosures without flinching. The doc came from town in his rattling Ford truck, shaking his head, saying it was some kind of summer ague. No antibiotics in those days, just mustard plasters and willow bark tea that tasted like bitter regret. Tommy clung to me, his tiny fingers digging into my shoulder, mumbling, "Mama, don't let go." And I promised him the stars and the moon, if only he'd fight a little longer. But come morning, as the roosters crowed and the first light painted the kitchen curtains gold, he let out one last shaky breath and was gone. Just like that, poof. My heart shattered into a million pieces, scattering like dry leaves in a prairie wind. I rocked him in my arms all through that endless night, whispering old hymns. My ma taught me Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound, but nothing seemed to cut through the haze. Henry, my husband, he was kneeling by the bed, his big calloused hands clenched in prayer tears streaming down his weathered face, something you rarely saw from a man built like an oak tree who'd stare down dust storms and bank foreclosures without flinching. The doc came from town in his rattling Ford truck, shaking his head, saying it was some kind of summer ague. No antibiotics in those days, just mustard plasters and willow bark tea that tasted like bitter regret. Tommy clung to me, his tiny fingers digging into my shoulder, mumbling, "Mama, don't let go." And I promised him the stars and the moon, if only he'd fight a little longer. But come morning, as the roosters crowed and the first light painted the kitchen curtains gold, he let out one last shaky breath and was gone. Just like that, poof, my heart shattered into a million pieces, scattering like dry leaves in a prairie wind. Lordy, the pain, it hit me like a thunderclap, knocking the breath clean out of my lungs. I wailed something fierce, holding his still body against my chest, rocking back and forth, till the neighbors came running with their pies and prayers, thinking maybe they could stitch me back together. But how do you mend a mama's broken soul when her boy's the light that kept her going? Henry tried, bless his heart. He buried himself in the fields, plowing deeper furrows than necessary, hoping the sweat would wash away the grief. But at night, I'd hear him sobbing in the barn like a wounded animal. Me, I wandered through the days like a ghost in my own skin, cooking meals. Nobody touched staring at Tommy's empty chair at the table, its legs still wobbling from when he kicked it with his bare feet. The farm felt hollow, too, the cows low and mournful and the wind whispering through the cornstalks like it was carrying his laughter away. That heartbreak, it changed everything, darling, turned my world upside down and inside out. Folks in town said time heals all wounds, but back then with the war still fresh in everyone's minds and the radio crackling with news of Korea heating up, it felt like the sorrows just kept piling on like storm clouds over the Mississippi. I remember walking to the little graveyard on the hill where we laid him under a simple stone engraved with our beloved Tommy, and kneeling there in the dirt praying for a sign, any sign that he was at peace. The sun beat down warm on my back, but inside I was freezing a cold ache that no quilt could chase away. Sarah, my little girl, she was just 3 toddling around asking, "Where's Tommy, Mama?" And I'd pull her close, bury my face in her hair that smelled like sunshine and soap, telling her he was up with the angels watching over us. But truth be told, I wondered if those angels even cared, because if they did, why'd they take my boy? Weeks turned to months, and I forced myself to keep moving, milking the cows before dawn, baking bread for the church auction just to feel like I had a purpose. But the nights, oh, those were the worst when the house creaked and the shadows danced. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every missed chance to keep him safe. Did I let him play too long in the evening dew? Should I have called the doc sooner? Guilt gnawed at me like a hungry fox in the hen house, stealing what little peace I had left. Henry and I, we clung to each other tighter than ever, sharing quiet talks by the fire where he'd say, "Ellie, we're gonna make it through this for Tommy's sake," and I'd nod, pretending I believed it. Small town life, it pulls you along. You know, neighbors dropping by with stews and stories, reminding you you're not alone in the hurt. But deep down, that loss carved a hollow in me that echoed with every heartbeat, a reminder that joy and sorrow dance close together in this life. And here's the thing, honey, that wasn't even the deepest cut. As I pieced myself back together, tending to Sarah and the farm, I started noticing little things, whispers in the wind, maybe signs that Tommy's passing was tied to something bigger, something hidden in our family's roots. See, my ma, she'd always hinted at secrets from the war years when Pa was off fighting in Europe, things she buried deeper than Pa's old war medals in the attic. But losing Tommy, it stirred those shadows, made me wonder if there was a curse or a truth waiting to unravel. One evening while sorting through Ma's old trunk for a quilt patch, I found a faded letter, tucked in the lining yellowed with age addressed to her from some fella I'd never heard of. My hand shook as I unfolded it, the words blurring through tears. "Dear Ruth, I can't keep pretending our boy? What in tarnation did that mean? My heart pounded like a drum at a county fair as the pieces started shifting, revealing a secret that could tear everything wide open. Hold on tight, darling, because that's when the real storm started brewing in my life, the kind that tests if you've got the grit to weather them all. Oh, honey, that letter from Ma's trunk, it sat burning a hole in my pocket for days like a hot coal. I couldn't bring myself to drop, but life don't wait for you to sort your secrets, darling. It just keeps rolling on like the big old Mississippi pushing toward the sea. So I tucked it away in my hope chest under the quilt Ma pieced before the war, figuring some truths are best left sleep until you're ready to face them. Instead, I threw myself into being the mama Sarah needed and keeping the farm from going under now that Tommy was gone. Henry, he worked the plow from can to can't barely speaking unless it was about the crops or the weather, but we found solace in the routine, the way the earth smells after a rain, or how Sarah's giggles could chase the blues away on a good day. Those early months blurred into a haze of survival, small victories, like when the first green shoots poked through the soil, reminding me that even after loss, something new could grow if you tended it right. But let's step back further, honey, because to understand how that heartbreak rooted deep, you gotta know where I came from, the soil that shaped this old gal's bones. I was born Eleanor Ruth Harlan in the thick of World War II back in 1943 on a crisp autumn day when the leaves were turning gold and the world was at war farther away than I could imagine. Our farm sat just outside Des Moines, Iowa, a patch of black dirt that Pa had wrestled from the prairie with his bare hands, and a mule named Bessie. Ma always said I came into the world hollering like a banshee right as the radio announced another battle in the Pacific, making her laugh through her labor pains that I was born to stir things up. We lived in a two-room cabin with a wood stove that belched smoke on windy nights and a root cellar stocked with potatoes and jars of canned peaches from the Victory Garden out back. Money was tighter than a drum back then, ration books for gas and sugar stamps for tires, but folks made do with what the good Lord provided and a heap of American grit. Pa was already gone by my first birthday, shipped off to Europe with the army living Ma to hold down the fort with nothing but her wits and a neighborly spirit that could rally a barn raising faster than you could say Jack Rabbit. She'd wake before the roosters milking the cows and tending the hogs while I toddled around in her apron strings, chasing chickens across the yard. I remember the radio being our window to the world, crackling with President Roosevelt's fireside chats telling us how every scrap of tin or rubber counted toward victory. Ma would hum along to Boogie Woogie Boogle Boy while scraping lard for soap, her hands chapped red but her smile steady as the sunrise. We'd plant beans and tomatoes in the side yard, dodging the air raid drills that had the whole town heading for basements, even though no bombs were falling on Iowa. Neighbors shared everything, a cup of flour here, a mended sock there, and on Sundays we'd gather at the Methodist church for potlucks, where the preacher spoke of sacrificing for the boys overseas, and the choir belted out the Star-Spangled Banner till your chest swelled with pride. By the time I was 4, the war was winding down, and Pa came marching home one drizzly April morning, his uniform hanging loose on a frame that had seen too many foxholes. I ran to him, squealing, Daddy, clinging to his legs like a burr on wool, while Ma cried tears of joy mixing with the rain on her cheeks. He scooped me up, smelling of tobacco and far-off places, spinning me round till I giggled so hard I near wet myself. But even as a little tyke, I could sense he wasn't the same, the way his laugh didn't reach his eyes, or how he'd startle at loud noises like thunder clapping over the fields. At night, I'd creep to his chair by the fire, watching him polish his metals lost in thought, and I'd climb into his lap, whispering, "Tell me about the war, Daddy," hoping to pull him back to us. He spin yarns of brave soldiers and liberated towns, but there was always a shadow, a pause, where he'd stare into the flames, saying, "War takes more than flesh, Ellie girl. It steals your sleep too." That's when I first learned about the cost of freedom, the quiet hurts that don't show in the newsreels. We settled back into farm life quicker than a cat on a hot tin roof, pa fixing fences and sowing wheat, while Ma baked bread that filled the house with yeast and warmth. Summers were pure magic honey, barefoot days, running through the alfalfa fields, catching grasshoppers in jars and cooling off in the creek that wound through our back 40. I'd ride Bessie the mule to the one-room schoolhouse 2 miles down the gravel road, learning my ABCs alongside kids from families just like ours, all dreaming of being teachers or pilots, or maybe just good farmers carrying on the legacy. Teachers were strict back then, paddling for misspelled words, but they taught us values too, how America was the land of opportunity built by folks who rolled up their sleeves and got to work. After school, I'd help Ma with the churning or Pa with the harvest, the three of us singing folk tunes like Shenandoah as the sun dipped low painting the sky in pinks and oranges. Life felt solid, then rooted like the big elm tree by the barn that had stood through droughts and blizzards watching over generations. But even in those golden years, the world nudges with reminders that peace was fragile. In 1947, when I was 4, the news came crackling over the radio about the war in Korea starting up again, stirring old fears in Pa's heart. He'd gather us around the supper table, talking about how we had to stay vigilant, planting more crops to feed the troops and saving bacon grease for the war effort, even though it was a different fight. I remember the community drives where kids like me collected scrap metal pushing wagons full of old tires and tin cans down Main Street, feeling like little patriots marching to the beat of Uncle Sam's drum. Pa joined the VFW meeting with other vets sharing stories over coffee, and I tagged along once, hiding behind the counter, listening to tales of buddies lost and battles won that left them changed. It planted a seed in me early that resilience meant facing the unknown with your chin up, knowing your family's strength came from leaning on each other through the storms. As I grew towards school age, the farm taught me lessons harsher than any textbook. One winter in '49, the snow piled high as the eaves and the well froze, solid, forcing us to haul water from the neighbor's pump half a mile away. Pa and I trudged through drifts, my mittens soaking through, but he'd sing "Over the River and Through the Wood" to keep our spirits up. Ma stitched our clothes from feed sacks, turning plain cotton into dresses with flower prints that made me twirl in delight. We didn't have much, but we had plenty of love and laughter, like the time Pa taught me to fish in the creek using corn for bait and me pulling up a perch bigger than my arm hollering, "Look, Ma, I caught supper." Them joys stuck with me, honey, simple as they were balming the soul against life's rough edges. Church was our anchor, too. Every Sunday morning, the whole town squeezing into pews worn smooth by years of prayer, singing hymns that promised better days ahead. Schooling started when I was 6, walking that dusty road with a lard bucket for a lunch pail packed with cornbread and an apple, if we were lucky. The teacher, Miss Hargrove, she was a spinster with a bun tight as her rules, but she had a soft spot for us farm kids, teaching us history about how America fought for independence and won through sheer will. I'd recite the Pledge of Allegiance with my hand over my heart, feeling the words deep, one nation under God, indivisible, believing it like gospel. Recess was wild games of kick the can and tag under the big maple tree where I'd scrap knees and elbows, but come home with stories that lit Ma's eyes. By 8, I was helping more around the house, learning to knit scarves from wool we spun ourselves and baking cookies for the bake sale to fund new books. Pa said I had Ma's touch in the kitchen, my biscuits light as clouds and flaky as autumn leaves. Yet under that wholesome life, secrets simmered just like that letter I found years later. Ma had her quiet moods, staring off toward the horizon when she thought no one was watching, and Pa would hush questions with a look that said, "Let your ma be." I chalked it up to war worries, but it nagged at me like an itch you can't scratch. One summer evening in '51, when I was 8, we had a big family reunion, aunts, uncles, and cousins from all over gathering under the tent. Pa set up in the yard. Tables grown with fried chicken, potato salad, and Ma's famous blackberry cobbler, while fiddles played turkey in the straw and kids danced in the grass. I remember Pa toasting to family, the true backbone of this great land, his voice thick, but then Ma slipped away early, heading to the house with red eyes like she'd been crying. I followed quiet as a mouse peeking through the screen door to see her clutching an old photo album, whispering to herself about what might have been. It gave me chills, honey, that first glimpse of shadows in our sunny world, making me wonder what pains our folks carried beneath their smiles. That wonder grew as I hit my teens, the farm expanding with Pop buying more land, using his GI Bill to get a tractor that chugged like a beast, saving us from mule days. But the Korean War dragged on, and whispers of draftees had the town buzzing like bees in a hive. My cousin Jimmy got called up in '52, leaving his sweetheart weeping at the bus stop, and it stirred something fierce in me, a determination to make every day count. I'd help harvest the corn standing tall in the bed of the truck as Pa drove shucking ears faster than you could blink, the sun beating down and sweat stinging my eyes, but feeling alive, part of something bigger. Evenings we'd sit on the porch snapping beans, talking about dreams, Ma encouraging me to study hard, maybe become a nurse or teacher, see the world beyond these fields. Ellie, but don't forget your roots. Pa nodded, adding, America's full of chances for gals like you, just gotta grab them with both hands. By 12, I was courting my first real feelings for Billy McAllister, the red-headed boy from the next farm over. We'd sneak off to the hayloft sharing stolen kisses that tasted like peppermint and possibility, his hand shy in mine as fireflies blinked around us. Life buzzed with promised school dances where we jitterbugged to Elvis on the jukebox and church youth groups, planning hay rides that ended in s'mores and stargazing. But the undercurrents pulled too one night in '55 when a storm hit fierce, tearing the roof off the barn and flooding the cellar. We lost half the harvest, Papa in the kitchen muttering about loans and hard times while Ma comforted him with tea and quiet words. I helped rebuild hammer and nails till my palms blistered, learning that resilience meant rebuilding stronger, tying the beams tighter against the next blow. That storm mirrored the one brewing inside me, honey, the secrets from Ma's past starting to whisper louder as Tommy's loss loomed on the horizon, pulling me toward adulthood's trials. And just when I thought we'd weathered the worst, Pa took ill that same year, a cough that wouldn't quit, turning into something the doc called consumption. He faded quick, hiding it behind jokes at first, but by Christmas he was bedridden, coughing up blood that stained the sheets like rust. Ma nursed him day and night, her face lined with worry, while I took over the chores, milking at dawn and feeding the stock, my young shoulders aching under the load. The whole town rallied, bringing broth and blankets, praying at services for his recovery, but come February, as the snow thawed, he slipped away, peaceful in his sleep, leaving us with a farm to run in a hole bigger than the Iowa sky. I was 13, standing at his grave, tossing dirt on the casket, my heart splintering anew, whispering, "Don't leave us, Pa," but the wind carried my words away. Ma and I clung tighter than her, teaching me to shoulder the yoke, promising, "We'll make him proud, Ellie, keep the home fires burning." That loss had hardened me a bit, taught me the American way of pushing through tears with calloused hands and unyielding hope. From there, life sped up like a freight train. Ma and I working the farm with hired hands when we could afford them, be dropping out of school after 8th grade to help full-time. Summers brought county fairs where I'd enter my pies and jams, winning blue ribbons that hung proud on the kitchen wall, reminders that even in sorrow you could shine. Winters were lean holding up with stories by the fire. Ma sharing bits of her youth tales of dancing in speakeasies before the war, and a beau who didn't come home from Pearl Harbor. Those nights bonded us deeper than blood, her vulnerability cracking open the family armor, letting me see the woman behind the pillar. By 16, I was near grown, courting Henry steady now. His steady ways a comfort after Pa's passing, and dreaming of a family of my own to fill the empty rooms. But as the 50s dawned with rock and roll on the airwaves and cars gleaming in driveways, the shadows from that old letter loomed larger, hinting at tragedies yet to unfold, secrets that would test every ounce of our resilience. Hold on to your hat, honey, 'cause the real heartaches were just warming up, ready to sweep through like a twister across the plains. Oh, honey, that twister I mentioned, it didn't just rattle the barn, it upended my whole world, starting with the man I thought would be my rock through every storm. Henry and I, we tied the knot in the summer of '59 under a sky so blue it hurt to look at, with the whole town crammed into the little white church on Main Street. He looked sharp in his borrowed suit, his hair slicked back like a movie star, and I floated down the aisle in Ma's old lace dress, let out at the seams, feeling like the luckiest gal in Iowa. Reverend Hayes boomed about love enduring all things, and we promised forever with rings that cost less than a week's groceries, but shone brighter than fool's gold. Afterward, the reception spilled onto the lawn with lemonade in mason jars and Aunt Mabel's 3-layer cake that fed 50 hungry souls. Henry whispered in my ear, "Ellie, you're my home now," and I believed it deep in my bones, thinking we'd build a life sweeter than the honey from Pa's old hives. We settled into the farmhouse, expanding the garden and adding a room for the babies we planned right off the bat. Sarah was born first in 60, a squalling bundle with my eyes and Henry's dimples making the night sleepless, but the days brimming with joy. I'd rock her on the porch, humming lullabies while Henry tilled the back 40, dreaming of buying a new tractor to ease the load. Life hummed along like a well-oiled combine, small-town rhythms of barn dances and Friday night fish fries where we'd two-step to Hank Williams till our feet ached. By 62, Tommy came along, my little firecracker boy with curls that wouldn't quit and a grin that could charm the birds from the trees. Holding him close, I felt whole again, the losses of Ma and Pa fading just a touch in the warmth of my own family. We scraped by on Henry's mechanic wages and my sewing, but we had enough laughter to fill the silences and neighbors who lent a hand when the tractor broke down or the roof sprang a leak. But then the shadows lengthened, darling, as that fool war in Vietnam started sucking in boys like a whirlpool. Henry got his draft notice in 65, right after Tommy turned 3, the paper crisp and cold as a winter wind slapping us across the face. He tried to joke about it, saying, "Maybe I learned to fix Jeeps over there and come home with stories," but his eyes were stormy knowing what Korea had done to his own pa. I packed his duffel with clean socks and Ma's rosary beads, praying harder than ever while Sarah clung to his leg, asking, "Daddy, when you coming back?" The bus station was a tear-soaked affair with wives and mamas waving handkerchiefs as the Greyhound pulled away, leaving a dust cloud like a bad omen. Letters came steady at first, tales of training in Georgia and the heat of basic, but then they trickled to postcards with stamps from Saigon, his words careful not to scare us. "Miss you all more than words, honey. Keep the home fires burning." He'd write, and I'd read them aloud to the kids, pretending his voice filled the room. Months dragged like molasses in January, the farm peeling up chores without his strong arms to lift the hay bales or mend the fence. I took a job at the feed store, weighing grain sacks that near broke my back just to keep beans on the table and the bank off our necks. Sarah started school that fall, coming home with drawings of her daddy as a hero in a helmet, and Tommy, he'd mimic soldiers marching across the kitchen floor with a broom for a rifle. Nights were the hardest, lying in our empty bed, staring at the ceiling cracks, wondering if he was safe or if some jungle ambush had stolen him away like it did so many. The radio droned with news of protests and body counts, making my stomach twist, and the town divided, some flying flags, proud, others whispering about bringing the boys home. Ma's old letter still nagged at me, tucked away, but I pushed it down, focusing on surviving one day at a time. Then the hammer fell in early 67, 6 months after his last letter. A Western Union boy on a bike knocked on our door, his face pale as milk. I knew before he spoke that cold dread coiling in my gut like a snake. "Mrs. Harlan, we regret to inform you your husband Henry was killed in action near the DMZ." The words blurred as I crumpled to the stoop, the world going black around the edges. Sarah ran out screaming, "Mama, what's wrong?" And Tommy froze in the doorway, his thumb in his mouth looking smaller than ever. Neighbors swarmed like bees to honey, bringing casseroles and condolences, but nothing filled the void the telegram carved. Henry's body came home in a flag-draped casket, the funeral packed with vets in uniform saluting. As we lowered him beside Pa, the bugler playing taps that pierced my soul like a knife. I stood there in my black dress holding the folded flag against my chest, whispering, "Come back to me, Henry, you promised." But the ground just swallowed him up, leaving me a widow at 24 with 2 young'uns and a mountain of bills. That grief has swallowed me whole, honey days blending into nights where I'd wake gasping from dreams of his face and the rice paddies. Sarah turned quiet, drawing pictures of broken hearts, and Tommy, he'd wet the bed asking for Daddy in the dark. The farm teetered, we lost the south field to weeds because I couldn't hire help, and the bank sent notices red as blood demanding payments I didn't have. I sold Pa's old watch and Ma's silver locket just to buy seed, but pride kept me going to church Sundays, sitting tall in the pew, pretending I had it together. Folks said, "Ellie's strong as an ox, she'll pull through." But inside, I was splintering like old barnwood in a gale. That's when the first big peak hit me, darling, the raw ache of burying your love and facing tomorrow alone. It nearly broke me clean in two, but something stubborn about being an American farm girl made me lace up my boots and keep plowing. I clawed my way forward, taking in laundry and mending clothes for the whole county, my fingers raw from needles and soap. Sarah helped after school, fetching water and stirring the soup, while Tommy tagged along like a shadow, his questions about heaven tearing fresh holes. By 68, the war raged hotter with Tet on the news and protests tearing up the cities, but out in Iowa, we just hunkered down waiting for peace. I met a fella, then name of Walt, a quiet widower from the next town over working the lumber yard, his smile kind enough to ease the loneliness. We courted proper chaperone walks by the creek and church picnics where he'd bring wildflowers picked fresh. Nothing rushed, just comfort and shared silences and the way he'd fix my porch step without asking. Tommy took to him, calling him Uncle Walt, and Sarah warmed slow but sure. I thought maybe this was the Lord's way of mending the tear, a second chance at family without replacing Henry. But secrets have sharp edges, honey, and mine started bleeding through the cracks. Walt and I, we got close one stormy night in '69 when the power flickered out and we were stranded at my place sharing canned peaches by candlelight. What started as solace turned to something more, a moment of weakness born from too much heartache and not enough light. Come morning, guilt washed over me thick as river mud, but it was done. And months later, I realized I was carrying a child, a surprise I couldn't face in our small town where tongues wag faster than windmills. Panic set in, darling, I couldn't raise another baby alone, not with the whispers and the shame, so I made the hardest choice, confident in a cousin in Chicago who arranged for adoption quiet and quick. The birth was in a clinic far from home. The baby girl handed off before I could even hold her proper, leaving me hollower than before. I named her in my heart Lila after the lilies Ma loved, but to the world she never was. Back home, I buried the truth deeper than a well, telling no one, not even Walt, who drifted away thinking I lost interest, his hurt eyes haunting me still. The 70s rolled in like a dust storm, hiding the sun with inflation beating at our heels and gas lines stretching longer than a preacher's sermon. I focused on the kids, Sarah blooming into a teenager with dreams of nursing school, and Tommy growing lanky and full of questions about his pa. We moved to a smaller place in town, renting out the farm to make ends meet the fields that Pa loved, now tilled by strangers. Church kept us grounded, Sister Agnes, teaching Sunday school with stories of jobs trials, reminding us trials build character if you let them. But the Vietnam wounds festered letters from old Army pals trickling in with tales of buddies still missing, stirring my grief fresh. Sarah started that, and a boy named Jack, sweet as pie, but drafted 2 in '72, leaving her weeping at the supper table, echoing my own pains. I held her close, saying, "Pray, girl, and stay busy, it'll pass," but doubt crept in, wondering if peace would ever come for our boys. Then Tommy, my sunshine boy, he started acting strange in '74, coughing at night and running fevers that came and went like bad weather. I thought it was just growing pains or maybe the flu going round, but the doc in town scratched his head, sending us to the city for tests. Turns out it was some rare thing, leukemia. They called it a thief in the blood that no amount of prayers could chase away. We fought at fierce chemo treatments that left him bald and weak, but smiling through the pain, drawing pictures of us all in heaven. Mama, I'll be okay up there with Daddy. He'd say, his voice thin as thread, and I'd nod, fighting tears from his own. We'd beat it together. The town rallied bake sales and car washes to cover Bill's neighbors sitting vigil at the hospital. But by spring '75, as Saigon fell on the TV, he slipped away in my arms, just like I'd always feared the fever winning again. Burying him beside Henry broke something permanent in me, darling, a peak of sorrow so deep, I howled at the moon, questioning why the good ones go young, leaving the rest to pick up the shards. After Tommy, the world grayed out, I quit the feed store, holding up with Sarah, who was expecting her own baby by then, Jack safe, but changed from the war. We leaned on each other, her belly round with hope, while I stitched tiny blankets, pretending joy could return. But the secrets bubbled up in '77 when Sarah found an old photo in my drawer, a baby picture I'd kept hidden of Lila, her tiny face scrunched and innocent. "Mama, whose is this?" she asked, eyes wide, and I crumbled, telling her the truth in halting words about Walt and the adoption, the shame flooding back like a busted dam. She hugged me tight, crying, "You weren't alone, why didn't you say?" But the hurt lingered, a rift in our bond that took months to mend. Forgiveness came slow with Jack's support, us all talking late into nights about loss and lies, realizing families messy but worth saving. That exposure was another peak, honey, ripping open old wounds, but cleaning them too, letting light into the dark places. The '80s crashed in harder than a bull in a china shop. That recession hitting farms like a plague locust, devouring the crops, and banks foreclosing left and right. Sarah and Jack lost their dairy operation in '82, debts pilling higher than cornstalks, forcing them to move in with me, our 3-bedroom house bursting with grandbabies and worries. I took whatever work came nursing at the old folks' home, wiping brows and changing beds, my back screaming but pride keeping me upright. Prices soared, milk costing more than a day's wage, and unemployment lines snaking down the street folks I'd known forever now begging for handouts. Jack turned to odd jobs fixing cars in the driveway while Sarah sewed uniforms for the factory her dreams of nursing shelved for survival. We rationed like war days, stretching soup with potatoes and bread heels, praying the government checks would tide us over. Christmas '83 was leanest, yet presents wrapped in last year's funnies, but the kids' eyes lit up at the wooden toys Jack carved, and my stories round the tree about better times. Rock bottom came in '85 when the bank took the house, Sarah and Jack's last stand against the tide, leaving us packing boxes in the rain, grandbabies crying confused as we loaded a U-Haul bound for a cramped apartment in Des Moines. I stood on the porch one last time, touching the doorframe where I'd measured the kids' heights, whispering goodbye to ghosts of Henry and Tommy the lost, echoing every past sorrow. That eviction, it piqued the struggles, darling stripping us bare, testing if we had any fight left, but huddled in that tiny place with thin walls and shared baths, we found grit anew. Community stepped up, church folks offering meals in a spare room till we landed on our feet, Jack finding steady work at the plant and me advancing the head nurse. Through the recessions and revelations, we learned resilience ain't flashy. It's the quiet choice to rise each morning, brew coffee strong, and face the day with whatever's left in the tank. America's heart, it beats in those moments, honey, pulling together when the chips are down, no matter the war or wallet woes. Oh, honey, that rock bottom in the apartment, it felt like the end of the trail, the kind where you hang up your spurs and call it quits. But darling, life's got more twists than a back road in the Ozarks, and mercy has a way of sneaking up when you're too beat to notice. We scraped by in that shoebox place, walls so thin, you could hear the neighbors arguing over coffee with mice for company and the heater sputtering like an old Ford on its last legs. But Jack, he rolled up his sleeves, landed a spot on the assembly line at John Deere Welding Parts. That'd help feed the nation, his calluses thickening like armor. Sarah took to childcare in the church basement, watching toddlers while dreaming of her nursing badge, and I kept at the old folks' home, changing beds and sharing stories that made the residents forget their aches for a spell. The grandbabies, little Emma and Joey, they brought sparks to our days, their chubby hands tugging at my apron as I taught them nursery rhymes and how to whistle through a blade of grass. It wasn't glamour, but it was ours, a fragile thread of hope woven through the hardship, reminding us that even in the leanest times, family was the real fortune. By '86, the economy started thawing like spring mud after a long freeze, jobs opening up and prices easing just enough to breathe. Jack got promoted to supervisor, his steady hand earning respect from the crew and enough extra to fix the truck's carburetor so we could visit kin without hitching rides. Sarah enrolled in night classes at the community college, her eyes lighting up over anatomy books, promising to make something of her dreams once the kids were bigger. Me, I found joy in the small things like baking pies for the church bake sale, using berries from a wild patch down by the river, or reading bedtime tales to Emma about brave grandmas who outsmarted wolves. The apartment grew on us too. We papered the walls with drawings from the kids and hung Ma's old quilt for warmth, turning necessity into a nest. But the biggest shift came quiet, like dawn creeping over the fields when a letter arrived one crisp fall morning, postmarked from California, the return address scrawled in a hand that looked familiar yet strange. I stared at it for an age, my heart thumping like a jackhammer, remembering that long-buried secret from '69, the baby girl I'd given up. Lila, she was now a woman of 16, judging by the date, curious about her roots after finding adoption papers in her ma's things. Dear Mrs. Harlan, it read, I've always known I was adopted, and the agency gave me your name. I hope this doesn't upset you, but I'd like to meet if you're willing. Her words were polite, shaky with nerves, and I folded it up, tears blurring the ink, knowing this was the Lord's timing, pulling threads loose for healing. I showed Sarah first, her eyes widening and softening as she hugged me tight. Mama, this is your chance. Let her in. Jack nodded, practical as ever. Family's what we make it, Ellie. Let's bring her home. We wrote back inviting her for Christmas, my hands trembling as I sealed the envelope, wondering if forgiveness could stretch across years and miles like a prairie sunset. She arrived on a Greyhound bus, snow dust in the streets, the station buzzing with holiday travelers. I waited by the door's heart in my throat till I spotted her tall and slender with Henry's strong jaw and my wavy hair falling loose over a wool coat. Our eyes met and time stopped, darling. She rushed forward whispering, Mama, and I pulled her into a hug that squeezed out all the hid pains, the kind that mends fences taller than any storm blew down. Tears flowed free as river water, Sarah embracing her half-sister with whoops of joy and Jack shaking her hand, welcome to the clan. We piled into the truck driving back to the apartment where the kids swarmed her like puppies, Emma, tugging her sleeve. Are you our auntie? And Joey offering his toy truck with a grin. Over hot cocoa and my gingerbread, we talked slow at first, spilling stories of her life in the city, adopted folks who loved her fierce but always wondered about her blood. I told her about Walt, the comfort that led to her birth, the shame that stole her away, apologies until my voice cracked. But she squeezed my hand saying, "You gave me life, Mama. That's more than enough." That reunion has swelled our home beyond the walls, turning strangers into kin overnight. Lila stayed through New Year's, sharing laughs over board games and helping Sarah with the chores, her city ways, a fresh breeze in our routine. She spoke of California dreams, beaches, and movie stars, but listened hungry for Iowa tales, the farm days, and Pa's yarns. Buried hurt surfaced gentle like thorn soil. I confessed the full weight of losing Henry and Tommy, how guilt had chained me silent, but she listened without judgment, adding, "Grief's a heavy load, Mama, but sharing it lightens the yoke." Sarah opened up too about her pains from the secret feeling sidelined, but finding peace in the truth. We're whole now, sisters through and through. Jack cracked jokes, easing the tears, turning our circle into a fortress of forgiveness, the American dream alive in our patched-together family, pulling through wars and woes with open arms. From there, hope bloomed steady small victories, peeling like harvest stacks. By 87, we saved enough for a down payment on a modest house on the edge of town, 3 bedrooms with a yard for the kids to run wild and a porch for rocking chairs at dusk. Jack's steady job kept the lights on, and Sarah graduated nursing school, pins gleaming on her uniform as she started at the local clinic helping folks just like I'd done for years. Lila visited regular, writing letters thick with photos of her high school pals and dreams of college, promising to come back summers to learn farm ways, even if it was just planting tomatoes in pots. I took pride in watching Emma and Joey grow. Emma with her mama's fire wanting to be a teacher, and Joey tinkering with engines like his pa, the cycle of life turning sorrow to strength. Church felt richer too, our pew fuller with Lila joining on holidays, singing hymns that hit deeper, now laced with gratitude for second chances. But the real peak came that summer of '88, a family revelation that tied every loose end in a bow tighter than Ma's best quilt. We'd planned a big picnic down by the creek, the old swimming hole where Henry and I courted long ago, tables laden with fried chicken coleslaw and my blackberry cobbler that drew ants from miles around. Lila brought her boyfriend, a nice boy named Tom, shy but solid, and we'd invited Walt too after tracking him down through old town records. He was widowed, now gray at the temples, but his eyes lit when he saw Lila, recognizing the spark of youth in her face. We sat in a circle under the willow tree, stories flowing like the water nearby me, telling the full tale from the stormy night to the adoption, the regrets I'd carried like stones in my pocket. Walt nodded, tears glinting. "I always wondered, Ellie, thought you'd moved on, but seeing her now, it's a blessing." Lila reached for his hand. "You're my pa too, if you'll have me," and he pulled her close, the years melting away in that embrace. "No," Sarah watched, smiling through misty eyes, whispering to Jack, "Look at us all pieced back together." And the grandbabies danced round us, oblivious to the depth, but feeling the joy in the air. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire oranges, we shared a prayer. Reverend Hayes leading us in thanks for resilience, the kind that weathers Vietnam's jungles, recession's bite, and secrets sting. Henry and Tommy's spirits seemed to hover, gentle, approving the healing with a breeze that rustled the leaves. That moment, darling, it was pure magic, a triumphant comeback where losses turned to legacies, forgiveness, flooding the hollows left by tragedy. America's spirit shone through us, ordinary folks bound by blood and choice, rising from ashes, stronger, more tender-hearted, ready for whatever came next. The victories kept coming quiet but sure. Lila heading to college on a scholarship, studying history to honor our roots, while keeping ties tight with calls every Sunday. Sarah advanced the head nurse, her gentle touch saving lives in ways that echoed Ma's care, and Jack mentored young welders, passing on the grit that pulled us through. I retired from the home, but volunteered teaching seniors to knit and share their tales, finding purpose and giving back the wisdom hard won. Emma started school assing spelling bees with a sparkle that reminded me of Sarah Young, and Joey fixed the neighbor's mower, earning his first dollar proud as punch. Through it all, we honored the past, planting a garden in memory of the gone ones, tomatoes for Tommy's love of fresh eating, and lilies for Lila's name, blooming defiant against the weeds. Hope wasn't flashy, honey. It was these threads woven daily love and action, resilience, and the ripping of fences and the shouting of suppers, laughter rising from tears like steam off warm earth. Oh, honey, now that we've walked this long road together, from the heartbreak that cracked me open to the healing that stitched me back up, I find myself sitting here in my rocking chair on this porch, watching the fireflies dance like Tommy used to chase them in the evening light. 82 years I've been on this earth, darling, more twists and turns than a country road after a rain, and through it all, I've learned that life ain't about dodging the storms. It's about learning to dance in the downpour with your skirts tucked high and a song in your heart. The losses, they carved deep grooves in my soul. Henry taken too soon by that jungle war, Tommy's fever stealing his spark before he could grow tall, Pa's quiet fade, and Ma's unspoken burdens all peeling like snowdrifts on a winter fence. But resilience, honey, it's the quiet fire that keeps burning long after the woods turn to ash. The American grit that says, sure, you fell face first in the mud, but get up, dust off, and keep plowing, because the field's still waiting and the sun's gonna rise come morning. Look at us now, the family I never dreamed could mend so true, Sarah, with her nurse's cap steady as ever, tending to folks in the clinic, her hands gentle, but sure from all those years of holding on through the dark. Jack's out back tinkering with that old truck, passing on his know-how to Joey, who at 10's already fixing bikes for the neighbor kids, showing the next generation how to wrench a problem straight. Emma, she's twirling in her school dress, dreaming of stages and stories, her voice carrying that same spark Sarah had when she was little, full of wonder and no fear of falling flat. And Lila, my girl from the secret places, she's home for the summer from college, her laugh echoing through the house like a melody I forgot I knew, bringing photos of palm trees and books thick as Bibles to share over supper. Walt stops by now and then, his eyes soft with pride, watching her bloom, calling her daughter without a hitch in his voice, the years melting away in easy chats about nothing and everything. We've built this patchwork quilt of a life, threads of sorrow and joy, stitched tight with forgiveness, the kind that don't come cheap but pays dividends in peace. Reflecting on the wars that shaped us, WWII, with Pa marching off to France, living Ma to wrestle the plow alone, teaching me early that freedom's price is paid in pieces of your heart. Vietnam had ripped Henry away and shadowed Jack's steps even after he came home, changing him quiet-like, making him cherish the simple things, a full belly, a safe bed, a hand to hold. Them conflicts, they weren't just headlines, darling, they were telegrams at the door, empty chairs at the table, and mamas praying to a heaven that felt too far. But from those ashes rose the strength that carried us through the recessions, the 70s gas lines snaking longer than a revival meeting, and the 80s farm foreclosures swallowing dreams whole. I remember standing at auction yard, watching Pa's tractor sold to strangers for pennies on the dollar, the wind whipping my tears dry. But even then I knew we'd rise, 'cause that's the backbone of this land, folks, banding together with soup pots and sermons, pulling each other from the brink. Secrets too, they weighed heavy as millstones, that letter from Ma's trunk, revealing a half-brother lost to the war's chaos, a family branch I never knew but mourned all the same. My own hiding Lila away, born of shame and survival, it nearly drowned me in silence till truth set it free, showing me that hiding hurts more than facing the fire. But oh, the healing when she walked through that door, the hug that bridged 16 lost years, it taught me love don't measure by blood or time. It grows wild like thistles in a field, pushing through concrete if you give it sun. We've had our shares, now family gatherings under the big oak with Lila's stories from the coast mixing with Sarah's clinic tales, and the kids running wild chasing the same joys I did back on the farm. Even the small things, the way Emma bakes my apple pie crooked but sweet, or how Joey carves wooden soldiers like Henry whittled for Tommy, they weave the past into now a tapestry richer for the tears that dyed it. Hope, darling, it's the thread that runs through every heartache, the quiet promise that after the night, the dawn comes soft and sure. I see it in the grandbaby's eyes, unscarred by the wars we weathered, full of questions and giggles that chase shadows away. In Sarah's patients who thank her with hugs for a kind word in the storm, and in Lila's letters full of plans for a future bright as a July sky. America's taught me that too, from the victory gardens of my youth, planting seeds of plenty in wartime dirt, to the community barn raisins after floods where strangers become kin overnight. We've bounced back from Pearl Harbor to 9/11, from Dust Bowl droughts to market crashes, always with that stubborn spark saying we ain't done yet. My life's a testament to it, honey scars and all a roadmap of resilience, showing young folks like you that tragedy builds you if you let it not break you clean through. Now as the even settles cool and the stars wink on like old friends, I rock a little slower, my bones aching from the years, but my heart fuller than a rain barrel after a shower. I've outlived so many Henry, Tommy, Pa, their memories warm as quilted comforters, wrapping me on chilly nights, reminding me to keep sharing the stories, keep loving fierce, keep hoping against the odds. Life's joys sneak in too, now the way Lila calls me mama with a grin, or how Sarah and I sip peace and quilts from scraps, talking about nothing much, but feeling everything. The farm's gone, the big house too, but what lingers is the spirit, the grit that turned a scared girl into this old gal still baking pies for potlucks and praying for peace. Darling, if you're listening to this tale from your screen or chair, take it to heart. Life's gonna throw curveballs faster than a pitching arm, but you catch 'em, swing with all you've got, and remember the ones who went before lighting the way. So here's my lesson wrapped simple as cornbread. Love the hard way through the hurts, forgive quick as you can, and hold your kin close, 'cause they're the real treasure in this wild ride. Bouncing back ain't magic, it's choice. After choice, waking up, grinning at the sun, and thanking the good Lord for another go. We've seen America's best and worst, the battles won and lost, the fields fallow, then fertile, and through it all, family's the anchor keeping you steady in the chop. If this story's tugged at your heartstrings like a fiddle tune, made you laugh through tears or nod knowing your own pains, then do this old grandma a solid, share it far and wide with a friend, a kin or a stranger who needs lifting up today. Spread the hope, honey, 'cause in Sharon we all heal a little more. Y'all take care now, and may your days be as bright as an Iowa sunrise.